Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Couples Academy show. My name is Hassani. Good to have you with us. Wherever you're tuning in from around the country and around the world, we want to acknowledge you. We are in a series on rebuilding intimacy. A question came in about yesterday. Were we live yesterday? No, we had 3 intensives this weekend. So there was spillover into the beginning of the week. And so whenever we're not here, that's probably what's going on. Had a couple from Virginia, another couple from Kentucky, had an amazing time. And so they were on the verge of divorce, ready to call it quits, wasn't sure what they were going to do, and decided to come for the weekend to really make a significant impact on their marriage. They've also joined the Moving Forward program. So welcome all of the new members of the Moving Forward program. We welcome you. You're about to join a community that's going to change and transform your life. Really quickly, last chance weekends for the summer, June 7th through the 9th, July the 12th through the 14th, and August the 9th through the 11th. Make sure you sign up for that. All right, we're talking today about the 11 causes of intimacy breakdown. Now, affair or no affair, in any relationship, when you've been with someone long enough, there's so many potential things that can happen that can sever the connection, that can put a strain on the closeness and the intimacy that a couple has. And as we said in part 1, there's a very high percentage of people who go to counseling and their number one complaint is the lack of intimacy. And so I thought it would be wise to kind of walk you through a journey to show you what is common for most couples that causes this intimacy breakdown. If you are yet still intimate and close to your spouse, then you should be watching these to figure out what to avoid. But if you have experienced a breach or a break in your intimacy and you are not sure why, well, we're going to dive into these particular reasons, the 11. Okay, so as we say, there's 5 things that most couples struggle with, right? We know that it's sex, communication, finances, parenting, and in-laws. Those are the big 5. But the number one would happen to be communication issues. That's right, communication issues. Many of us struggle to communicate, particularly with our spouse. And so when we're talking about communication issues, really it's our lack of open communication. We have different communication styles that we've come into the relationship with. And maybe at first things worked, things were easy and smooth. But over the course of time, when we're no longer trying to impress each other, we settle into our normal ways of communicating and dealing with conflict. And because we haven't been taught as a couple how to navigate through challenging times, a lot of times there's a breach in the way in which we communicate. And so what happens is there's this book called The 7 Levels of Intimacy, and it talks about how you go from what we call cliche relationships all the way down to meeting each other's legitimate needs. This can only be done when you engage in intimacy. And so it requires sharing thoughts. And a lot of times couples who are in relationships don't feel comfortable, don't feel safe opening up their heart, opening up their mind, and sharing what's truly on their mind, what their thoughts are. Many people really struggle with sharing their feelings based upon what they've observed in their household and seen between mom and dad, or experienced in previous relationships, or based upon assumptions of how men are supposed to be, or women are supposed to be. All of these contributing factors sometimes influence a person's unwillingness to really share their feelings and to express their true needs. Maybe there have been some situations in the relationship that didn't go so well, some disappointments and frustrations. And so because of past failures, we anticipate future failures and already walk in making assumptions of what won't work, already concluding what our spouse will be willing to and not willing to do. And so it shuts us down. It shuts us down. And so now we're having these internal conversations with ourselves, these narratives and these stories that we're telling ourselves as to why it's not safe or not good or not worth opening up our heart and mind and sharing our thoughts, feelings, and our needs. And so as a result of that, miscommunication is a result of misunderstanding. See, I thought I knew. I assumed I knew. We didn't talk about it, but I made an assumption. And so now I show up in the relationship and I react or respond or act in such a ways based upon interpretations and subjective perspectives that I've had about you. But really, it was all a misunderstanding. I assumed certain things about your motive, your intent, about what you said and about what you did. But because we didn't take time to create a safe environment to communicate through issues, it caused a rift. And this is typically what happens. And so oftentimes you find couples who are either in conflict all the time, and this type of conflict puts a strain on the relationship, or they become conflict avoidant, right? I just want peace. I don't want to fight. I don't want to argue. And so as a result of that, you do not engage. You do not engage in addressing and resolving issues. And so these issues go unaddressed and unanswered. And as a result of that, you go your separate ways, you're living in a silo, and it creates tremendous problems in the relationship. So communication issues is the number one reason why there is a split in your intimacy. Number two, we need to talk about stress and life changes. This is a huge one. Typically, when we're talking about stress, we're talking about the stress that we receive from the world. Like most of us have jobs or we run businesses, and in our profession, we may be working very long hours. We have demanding jobs. We have job-related stress, maybe because we use a lot of physical exertion. In fact, there's a couple I'm working with. The husband's a police officer. And that is physically taxing on his body and on his mind. And when he comes home from work, he's just tired. And so the natural desire that he once had for his wife, the connection, the quality time, the engaging in conversations, the sexual fulfillment, I'm just so tired. I'm mentally tired. I'm emotionally tired. I'm physically tired. I just want to go to bed. I just want to go to sleep. And so what happens is because they're not operating in their best state because of stress, it has an impact on the relationship. And so what happens is the spouse feels rejected. They feel abandoned. They feel as if you just don't care because we're not giving each other the time and the energy that we once have. And let me tell you something, the number one secret culprit that really impacts relationships is time, the lack of time. Before you said I do, you spent a tremendous amount of time together. But because of the fact that you're now married and you're living life together, many things are demanding and weigh upon your time. And the more time you dedicate to other things, the less time you have for your spouse. And so there's been a shrinkage of quality time in relationships, which has caused an emotional shutdown and a wall that has erected. But in addition to work-related issues and the stress associated with that, oftentimes we see that there are life changes that take place. Now, interestingly enough, when we're talking about an affair, there are many contributing factors to an affair. One of them will be life changes. Now, we're not talking about affairs necessarily in this conversation. We're talking about rebuilding intimacy after an affair, right? That's what we're talking about. And we're talking about the 11 things that cause the intimacy breakdown. And so life events such as the birth of a child, think about this. When you are having a child, there's a lot of focus, time, and attention on the mother, making sure that she's in a healthy place. There are doctor visits. Then it gets to a place where it's very uncomfortable. It's not conducive to say engage in intimacy, physical intimacy, right? So that there's a pause on that because the wife is going, the mother to be is going through. Not a lot of time is necessarily spent working on the relationship or spending quality time together because she's going through her own experiences. Obviously, sometimes relocating, a move can cause a tremendous amount of stress on the relationship because, and I've seen this, couples who move from one part of the country to another, or they move to other countries and they're dealing with the demands and the pressures and the stresses of this move, and it becomes overwhelming. And I've got 1,000 things on my plate and I don't know what to do. I feel a little overwhelmed. Well, guess what? Less of a focus on that particular relationship. Sometimes there's a loss of a family member. Think about this. When a mother dies, a father dies, a sibling, a child dies, there's a tremendous mental, emotional impact that it has on that family member who loved the person who is no longer here. And so now it impacts them. And so, yes, a spouse will be there to support and love their spouse as they're going through that loss, but it does have a potential impact on the relational dynamic, at least for a period of time. We've seen this particularly when parents have children whose children have ceased, they've passed away. It has crippled and damaged relationships, particularly if they did not get the help that they needed, the recovery process that they needed to go through. A lot of times people don't go through any type of counseling process when they've suffered a loss. And if they're going to get back to their normal selves, they need to begin to engage in some type of therapy. So the stress and life changes that we experience can cause a decline in our intimacy. I hope that this is helping you guys. Let's go to the next one. Emotional and mental health. Emotional and mental health. This is a big one. So a lot of times people are struggling with all types of anxiety and depression. And interestingly enough, this mental emotional struggle probably existed before I do. It may not have been seen. It may not have been felt to the degree that it is now, but in most cases, it was there prior to. And my stress and my anxiety and my depression really shapes how I interpret, how I show up in life, how I react and respond, how I manage crisis, stress, and pain. And if I have not successfully managed it well, when I experience any type of challenge within my relationship, I may not be able to manage that well. And so oftentimes it may lead to possibly my withdrawal. I just don't want to be bothered. I don't want to be near anybody. I need to be alone. And I just withdraw, because withdrawing is safe for me, because I'm not exposed to the world, dealing with the pressures of the world. So if I'm going to deal with my own stuff, I rather deal with it alone. There's ultimately a decrease in intimacy. Okay. When a person's dealing with stress and anxiety and mental and emotional health issues, there's a disconnect emotionally. You know what? I'm dealing with my own emotions right now, and my emotions are so uncontrollable. I don't have the mental or emotional capacity to deal with you. There may be some unresolved traumas in one's past that they've never dealt with. And so it bleeds and spills into the relationship, and their inability to manage those things causes more conflict in the relationship, which is a breakdown of the intimacy. I hope this is helping. Let's go to one more. Physical health issues. This is a big one. This is really a big one. When we're talking about physical health issues, we're talking about potentially chronic illness. Now, a couple's sexual health is predicated on what? Their physical health. If you are generally healthy in your body, then you will be sexually healthy in your body. But if you're going through challenges physically in your normal health, it will spill into your sexual health. And we see that many people experience sexual desire issues, physical attraction issues, because that individual in that relationship may be going through some physical challenges and aren't at their best. So they don't feel at their best. They don't have the level of confidence. They don't have the energy. They don't have the willingness. And so there's a shutdown in that particular area. And then also the amount of fatigue. See, when you are sick, you just don't feel good. It's tiring. The energy is not there. And so you don't have the mental, emotional, or in this case, physical capacity to do the necessary things to show up for your spouse in the way that you should show up. So it causes a breakdown of your intimacy. Are you getting something out of this? Is this helping? Listen, we're going to go to a quick commercial break. We'll be right back after this commercial. Stay tuned. All right, guys, we're back. You're watching the Couples Academy show. We're talking about the 11 causes of intimacy breakdown. We just went through quite a few. We're going to continue this conversation. The next thing that causes intimacy breakdown is sexual dysfunction. Now, this is a huge issue. Remember, I said the top 5 issues: communication, finances, parenting, in-laws, and then sex. Sex is huge because it takes on many forms, right? So number one, there's the physical sexual problems that couples may experience. Issues such as, how about erectile dysfunction, ED? Interestingly enough, because of a man's struggle to perform, it creates a insecurity in that man, right? So now there may be performance anxiety. Oftentimes, the last thing that I want to do is let my spouse down. My desire is to please my spouse. My desire is to have my spouse yearning and craving and desiring me. And if I feel that I cannot do that, I retract. I don't engage at all. Possibly my spouse may have said something about my condition, and maybe it was in a loving way and I couldn't receive it. And maybe in her frustration, it was in a very negative way. And now I'm off put. And so I remember the words that you said in your moment of frustration, and it penetrated me and I held on to it. And interestingly enough, we see that people, and not all, I'm not saying, listen, I don't want you to hear me say, if someone has ED, they're going to cheat. No. But what we have found is that because someone felt like he couldn't be free, he couldn't please his wife because of his condition, that became one of the contributing influences, which led to an actual betrayal. Can I perform? Is it me? Is it my spouse? Does this thing work? Is this thing on? And so you try to see if you can do with others what you can't do with your spouse. Or guess what? I have a desire to please. I can't please you. So who else can I please? Is it possible? So this is why there's a moral decline. There's a phenomenal book called The Moral Decline and the slippery slope that we go through mentally because of our rationalizations and justifications for why we do what we do. And so this is why it's important that you're not just having internal conversations with yourself. You're talking to somebody who can help guide you through these particular challenges to help you overcome, because many people have experienced erectile dysfunction and have been able to overcome it. But in addition to that, there's also low libido, right? That's an issue that some people have. And because there's a low libido or a difference in the libido between the couple, it puts a strain and the stress on the relationship. There are many women. I'm not an expert on female sexuality, but I do know that there are physical challenges that women experience too, where there's pain associated with sex for whatever reason. Sometimes it's psychological, sometimes it is actually physical. And so if that male, if that female, if they're not seeking help, if they're not talking to a physician, if they're not going through some type of sex therapy counseling, the problem remains and it continues to cause a huge issue in the lives of their sexuality. But then in addition to that, you have the psychological sexual issues as well, because oftentimes people deal with past experiences, past traumas, molestation, sexual abuse, rape, and it spills into their current relationship. You would be surprised how many spouses that I've spoken to who refuse to open up and share with their partner what they have gone through previously. So there's this anxiety, this frigidness, there's this aversion to engaging in intimacy. The other spouse doesn't know why. There are times when they're freely having sex and things are great, and then all of a sudden it's almost like a trigger, and this person goes back 15 years ago and thinks that they're in the same place in the same time when they were abused. And so now I've seen it. This is a real thing. And if you're not getting that level of help to kind of guide you through these past traumas, it can be extremely hindering in terms of the intimacy that you're trying to establish with your spouse. Let's go to the next one. The next one is lack of quality time. Yes, we kind of talked about that when we were talking about the life transitions and the stresses that we go through, but a lack of quality time is a huge thing. People are just busy. Now, every single week when I meet with couples, how was your week? Oh man, it was busy. Well, did you do the homework? No, I didn't get a chance to. Why? Busy. Did you connect with your spouse the way you were supposed to? Well, we tried, but what had happened was we were busy. And busy simply means to be bound under Satan's yoke. Busy. Busy is not something good to brag about. Busy is not something good to claim. It means that you are bound. It means that you are enslaved. It means that you have not properly managed yourself within time. And so as a result, things fall by the wayside. At the end of the day, what couples do not prioritize, couples will not experience. If your spouse is a priority, then you will make time. You will create time. You will find the time. You will steal the time. You've made your job a priority. You've made paying bills a priority. You've made eating food a priority. You've made sleeping a priority. And because of that, very little compromises that. But somehow, some way, your spouse falls somewhere in the midst of all that. And your spouse gets the leftovers. And it creates resentment. Because everything that you give your attention to other than your spouse will look at that thing as competition. So now they're competing for your time with that other thing. Some of you are guilty of making your work your mistress. Some of you are guilty of making your friends your mistress. Some of you are guilty of making your video games and your extracurricular your mistress. Maybe you're serving and volunteering. Maybe you're coaching a children's baseball or football or basketball team. Whatever it is, if it's competing for time, if it's taking time away, if your focus is on something other than, that becomes the thing that your spouse begins to despise and hate, because you can give all your energy, all your time, all your effort, all of it, like your excitement, your enthusiasm. You give your best to everyone else, and I get your worst. You give them the most, I get the least. And so that has an impact. That creates bitterness and resentment. And so what happens is it shifts the dynamic in the relationship and leads to more problems. And so you need to spend time together. Mentally, emotionally, physically. You need to engage in all types of shared hobbies and interests that can form a bond and a connection. There needs to be rituals that you engage in on a daily basis to solidify this relationship. All right, hope that helps. Let's go to the next thing. Trust issues. Trust issues is one of the causes of intimacy breakdown. Let me tell you something. Trust is extremely important. And oftentimes trust is lost because of betrayals, because of disappointments, because of broken promises, a whole host of things. Of course, infidelity can put a significant strain on intimacy. And so there's a journey to get back to where you once were. And it takes place over a period of time. But beyond betrayals, but beyond infidelity, beyond all of those different things, sometimes it's your dishonesty. Sometimes the fact that you are not open and honest and transparent, and you don't know how to tell the truth. You lie. And lying has many cousins. Either you flat out lie, or there's the omission of truth, or you give a false impression, right? Or you're holding on to a secret, or listen, I'm going to tell you what you ask. If you don't ask, I'm not going to tell. Like, you're lying. Okay. And because of your dishonesty, it impacts my ability to trust you, even when you make decisions on your own, independent of me. Sometimes I can't trust your thinking. I can't trust that you have the best interest for me in this family. I can't trust you. And a lack of trust significantly will enhance the walls being built up, the distance being established. And you know what? I feel like I'm on my own. So now it becomes an opportunity for people to engage in self-preservation and self-protection within the confines of their relationship. So there's no longer where they're relying on their partner because they feel like they have to do it all by themselves. This is a huge problem. Trust is huge, and it is a foundational pillar for a long-lasting, mutually beneficial, healthy relationship. Let's go to the next. Emotional distance. Emotional distance is huge in relationships, and we got to talk about it. A lot of times when you've been together for so long, you feel like, you know what, we're just growing apart. We're just going in two different directions. We have different interests, we have different values, we have different friends, and slowly but surely over the course of time, we graduated in different directions because we started off possibly or somehow wound up possibly with all of these differences. You got your friends, I got my friends. You have your hobbies, I have my hobbies. You have your likes, I have my likes. And we're just two individuals operating in this thing called a marriage, but there's no oneness. We have individual ones, but no oneness in the relationship, no togetherness in the relationship. You know what? Your form of music, what you like, your entertainment is different. I'm not into that. The type of TV shows I like, you know what? I'm not into that. You do you, I'm gonna do me. You go in the living room, I'm gonna go in the bedroom. We'll see each other at the end of the night. At the end of the night, there's really nothing to talk about. We go to bed. You see what I'm saying? So there are challenges that have caused a strain and have caused this separation within the confines of this marriage, and we just grow apart. And then another part of this emotional distance that we experience is that there's a lack of vulnerability. There's a lack of vulnerability where we're not willing to open up and be vulnerable about what's really going on in our hearts and minds. And it talks about something we spoke about earlier, the inability to communicate. Because if I'm not communicating my issues. I'm not communicating my concerns. I'm tight-lipped. I keep it to myself. And so what happens over the course of time, things get progressively worse. So these are some of the things that you need to consider. Listen, I think that's enough for today. I've given you something to chew on. What I want you to do, I want you to sit down with your spouse. I want you to go through this video together. I want you to begin to have conversations. Pause the video as you do it. See, this is what we do for all of our members in the Moving Forward program. I'm giving you an insight into what we do. There's a whole lot more that we do, but this is something that you can begin to do. If you're not getting counseling, use this as a starting point to engage in healthy conversations that can help transition you into a better place within your relationship. If you can identify the very things that have broken down the intimacy, now you can reverse engineer and come up with a plan or a course of action that could begin to turn things around. So listen, tune in tomorrow as we do part 2 of this particular topic, the 11 causes of intimacy breakdown. Love you guys. See you in the morning. Take care.